Yeah, we have, well, I could have started in German, but I think we start. First of all, welcome here. I'm totally happy to see so many faces, so many friends. It's great to be here. I think I want to introduce shortly Mr. Michael Müller-Verweyen, who's the new director at the Goethe Institute here, who on a very short notice gave us that very beautiful gallery space and set up, and thanks to Alice who set up the table and the things, and to the wonderful team. I think, Michael, you would like to say just a few short introductions so everybody sees how you look like. And yeah, and then we just dance go ahead. Thank you.
I would like just to say welcome to all. Welcome to this discussion. I'm very grateful to Tobias. When we met, it really was on short notice, 3 weeks ago or so, when we were talking about that, and then we came into discussion of the venue and where the whole thing should take place. And then it worked out that we could have this in our gallery here. So why is this important? I think a Goethe Institute is something should do something more than just be a cultural place. It should be a place where cultural policies is also discussed. And that's why a roundtable on that topic, on the role of curator, is something we are proud to have here in our room. If you think of art, then we have to think in terms of discourses. And discourses should have someone who links the work of an artist to an ongoing discourse that is not only limited to one country, and especially the German Cultural Institute has a task to connect these two cities and two countries. So, in this respect, thank you very much, Tobias, and also a welcome to the other guests, especially to Oscar Holmes. We are honored to have you here, and sorry for the other and I would like to ask Tobias please to introduce the man. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's nice thing about Hong Kong art scene is certainly that we are a quite small art scene, and so I don't have to give long introductions to Oscar Ho, to Mai, and to Norman. Oscar basically is now the founding director of the Shanghai Museum of Contemporary Art. He was working in that building here for quite a while, running the art center with, as far as I heard, I've never saw them, very good exhibitions, and I believe that's so. May is very involved in a lot of independent spaces. I think you're working at Videotage as well as in the board of 1A space, both in the Cat Depot and also very active artists and doing lots of, just very involved in the And Norman is a writer and an artist, and also teaches a lot. He, together with Hayrem, are actually one reason why we have that discussion here. There are every Friday night when a certain group of people meets at the Fringe Club, and we were discussing about that wonderful article here, which is about Oscar Ho. Much better than original, certainly, on the photo. About the South China Morning Post, and being very honest about the art scene in Hong Kong, and a lot of people liked very much what they saw and what they read, and a lot of people were quite critical about it. But I think that was the first time we actually thought about having a discussion about it and having an open discussion about it, and seeing so many people here, it seems that there is a need to discuss curating in Hong Kong. So we will start. I will make a few very general, I wrote down yesterday a few very general things about curating, and then we just go into a very open discussion. I think we have first, we see as soon as there are questions from the public, I think we start with that, because there is no reason to keep it too much to the table, but let's see how things develop. I just want to say before I go into that we have another talk coming up on Sunday at Parasite. There are the flyers somewhere. Caroline has
Yep, it's on the reception table.
On the reception table. Hedwig Fein is here. She's the director of the Manifesta Foundation. The Manifesta Foundation is the organizer of the Manifesta Biennale, which is a nomadic biennale in Europe, probably the most interesting and most successful new biennial invention in Europe in the last 10 years. They also have an archive, they have a video rental, they have a lot of different things, which are, more chairs are coming, which are interesting, and I think if anybody is more interested in that organization of a biennial and a big event, and how to make something not local but more European, more international, this is definitely a talk you have to come to. There are very rare chances that people like Hedwig Fein are talking in Hong Kong. She's with the Manifesta Foundation for 10 years, and we are lucky she's on the way to Australia, and we just grabbed her right here, and she's going to talk Sunday 3 o'clock at Parasite. Okay. Originally, going back to curating, curating comes from the word, from the Latin word curare, which means taking care of things. And I don't think we want to talk tonight about that really 19th, 20th century idea of curating, where you basically was about collecting in a museum and exhibiting some things and being a very old-fashioned way of dealing with art, and it's still a very valid way, but I don't think we should talk here about the big museums and how to make big collections, or what we should do and what we should show here. I think it's more here to talk about small innovative projects, about artist spaces, about art spaces, about small solo exhibitions, or small spaces, or bigger but temporary projects in commercial spaces or in public spaces. So it's not so much about the big museum, which certainly didn't lose its touch, but it's more about the rest, what we are actually all doing. But then I read a lot about curators the last days, and then there was never anything which said, what the hell is a good curator? And so I thought, I write this list together, what I think is a good curator, because there are a few things which might be of interest tonight. Rule number 1 is, for every curator should be, make the artist happy, because only a happy artist is a good artist. That's something we should never forget. Then we or curators should see as many exhibitions of whatever quality as possible, because there's always something good or bad in everything. Do a lot of studio visits, and also curators should have a very good network, local and international, and also interdisciplinary, which I think is sometimes lacking. Curators in these small spaces should show tomorrow's art yesterday or today, so they should be always a step ahead. They should listen to younger artists for new trends, and trust, and that's important, trust art, and not the ever-changing discourse, but really trust artists and think in an anti-cycle, because trends go away actually, and good art stays. They should have a style, think different, and because curating an art is a mission, it's not something you can so easily put in a box. Have a good team, certainly, love it and trust it, that I thought was very. Then a good curator should know what they can do and what they can accomplish, and then but they should go 1 or 2 steps further. Not too many steps further, but because then they go overboard. But that is also important. Consider gender, power, and colonial relationships, but don't let them limit you. I think that's important. And then curating concentric circles, which always I try to do, is kind of as local as possible, but also as international as necessary. Then be independent, respect art and artists, not politicians and public opinion. Sometimes we hear more about public opinion than about listening to the artists. That's probably not. They should certainly know how to handle a hammer, paint a board, and things like that. Produce a show well. That's a lot of times when we have all the shows and so on, we forget that they also have to be hung on the wall very, very nicely. They should be staged very nicely, and we have to really consider that every work has an hour and that we should take every work very seriously and handle the whole show as kind of a stage. Try to pose questions, not answers. That's also something which curators a lot of times don't like to do. Don't care about audience numbers, but about audience quality. That's, yeah. Writing, publishing, fundraising are important, but they are not your main tasks. Drink and party with the artist as much as possible, but be the first one in on the next day. Don't take yourself too serious, but appear very serious. That's not nice. And in the end, love it or leave it, because there's no money in curating or no fame. It's just you do it for the art and the artist, and that should be the main concern. Here in Hong Kong, we certainly have different organizations, as we all know. We have the very old big ones. They collect, as I said before, the real projects, very professional people working in professional teams. They normally cannot do their decisions themselves, the curators. They have to listen to a team, or I learned today that the Hong Kong Art Museum doesn't even have a director, but they have to listen to the ministry, which I thought was quite interesting. They're very hierarchical, they never take risks, and they do quite, normally, mostly what they do is actually, they show monographic old shows, monographic solo shows by mostly male artists, or with big catalogs. Sometimes you see group shows, but they are mostly taken over. The other, then there are certainly the independent curators, people like Harald Seemann or Hans-Ulrich Obrecht or Wuhan Hu, more for Asia. They do more risky projects, they're closer to the art scene, but they're actually not as independent as they always seem to be, because they have to sell their product, they have to look that they do everything fine for the organization. So they are called independent curators, but I actually doubt that they are so independent, and that's something we should talk about later. The third way of curating is the way we at Parasite worked for quite a long time, the way Art 1A Space works and so on. Basically, it's curated by committee. A bunch of people gets together, looks at a bunch of proposals, and decides which ones get executed. Finally, this execution of these proposals is then done by either administrators and artists. There are no big curators involved in that anymore. Parasite now changed that a bit with the appointment of myself. We are now very director-based, so it's more like Kunstverein in Germany or the art spaces in Hong Kong, in Auckland, and Sydney. It's kind of there's a director, and he decides on the program and how things should be done. I think also what comes out of this whole, I think we have enough spaces in Hong Kong, and there is A1, there's Parasite, there's this wonderful gallery here, there's Artist Commune, there's Shanghai Art Speed. What is for me interesting is this relationship of local artists and international artists. There seems to be a lot of emphasis in Hong Kong about local art. There seems to be very few international art here. Which we might have to discuss why that is here. Another point I would like to discuss tonight is the idea about democracy. When you talk to ADC or something, they're always very proud that the committees and so on are voted by the Art Society. If you talk to the Art Society, they are not really happy with that model. It seems to be a pseudo-democracy which doesn't really work, and it's probably also a problem we face. Why is it important to talk about curating besides that we also certainly all, besides that I'm very interested in that topic, being new here, and it seems like there's a bigger interest. But I think also what happened in New Zealand where I worked before was the institutions didn't care about curating, there were no curator educated, and now there are like 5 positions free. There are no New Zealand curators which can take these positions, there will be curators imported. So a lot of local knowledge will be lost, a lot of local history, and all these things will be lost or will be very difficult to kind of get going again. And it seems like with the new West Kowloon project or with other projects that happen also in China, that we forget that it's important to actually educate curators and put that idea about curating on the map again. And I think that was also after reading the article about Oscar in the South China Morning Post, the main idea about that talk. And I would like to start, I think, after that, sorry, quite long monologue. I mean, the nicest word in that article was the idea about bureaucratic censorship, which I thought was, on one side, quite scary, but I was fascinated by the word. I wanted to ask Oscar to maybe talk about his experience with that bureaucratic censorship.
Well, censorship comes in many forms. You don't have to exercise this kind of political suppression to exercise censorship. By establishing a bureaucratic system that monopolizes everything, or establishing a kind of funding system that turns every artist into a civil servant, the government can have all kinds of control over what the art is going to be like. I want to repeat the story that I told at the newsletter on Archives, because it's a story that really touched me. Last year I started a course on curatorship, and this is the first time I designed a comprehensive course about curatorship. And I had absolutely excellent students. The students were so good and so devoted. By the end of the course, 1/3 of them wanted to quit their job and become the curator. And then it got me real nervous. And then I just realized I did something really seriously wrong. I have aroused their passion, but without thinking of the lack of opportunity for them. Okay, now we have a group of people who want to be curators. What the hell can they do in Hong Kong? So it's really, I mean, I have made a decision. I will not organize courses like this in Hong Kong because unless the system has been changed. It is irresponsible to nurture curator when the external environment is so hostile to any training of curators outside of the bureaucratic system. Now some of them will come to Shanghai and work with me as interns, and I think this is sad. Especially at the time we're talking about West Kowloon and building how many museums. I don't need to go into detailed explanation, as all of you are from the art field know how incestuous the existing museum system is. They simply would not allow any kind of outsider to move into it. You have to start up as curator 2 and step by step you move up there. And you'll be allocated to whatever positions, based on your seniority. It has nothing to do with your specialty either. So what it ends up is, outside of this bureaucratic system, you have these tiny institutions, So what kind of curators we're nurturing? We have the best is this kind of ad hoc project for independent curator. Honestly, it is a good experience, but it's never a real training ground for curators. Curatorship needs time, needs kind of nurturing. You need to it's just like the making of art. You need that kind of negotiation and gradual nurturing. And when you're sort of hopping around, do a project here, do a project there, wait until you get an ADC grant and then you do something. It's never a nurturing process. You don't have that kind of engaging experience. Plus, why I accept the existence of independent curator, it is always important for someone who wants to be a curator to work closely with an institution, realize the particular characteristic and nature of the institution, and gradually develop certain method of working. And even in cases like Parasite, they decided to employ a curator. The lack of funding opportunity, make it so make the training or the experience so incomplete. You never really got a chance to really to work on a proper catalogs that take 3 years of reader research, for example. So all of this has belittled all the curatorial work outside of this bureaucratic system. While within the bureaucratic system, we all know what kind of work we produce. So it has been a frustrating situation, despite the government's been talking about it since 1997, about sort of like corporatization. No, honestly, I'm quite sympathetic with some of the young curators in the museum system as well. I mean, I see some very excellent curators, full of passions and desires to do the job. But the system simply will not allow that kind of passions to come out. It's a system that discourages individuals, discourages risk-taking, discourage, but art is about risk-taking, about individual interpretation, about debate, about controversy. So the fact that a museum run by civil servant culture is fundamentally wrong because it's contradictory to the nature of museum and art. So here we have, been talking about it for nearly 10 years now. The government made it very clearly. By the time when the government decided to kill the two municipal councils, they made it very clearly that they want to corporatize the museum. And the same conclusion was made by the cultural policy that produced 2 years ago.
By the Commission of Heritage?
Cultural Heritage Commission. So the problem is nothing has changed. Now I dare to say, I say very clearly that no professional curator would dislike corporatization of a museum. Why? Because it creates more freedom, more space for individual expression. Obviously, there's still more risk. I mean, you done something wrong, someone's going to kill you. But that's part of the creative work of being a curator. That is, you're in a battlefield of intellectual debate or artistic debate. So, until today, I still do not see any development. And that's been really frustrating. And so more frustrating is that, I am probably one of the luckiest persons in Hong Kong that I happen to get a job, the only curator's job outside of the government system. And thank God for that, I have learned a lot and accumulated a lot. And I would love to pass it, what I have learned to the younger generation and share my experiences. And then I suddenly realized, dawned on me, I shouldn't do that, because it is wrong to arouse their passion in a place like Hong Kong. So it's sad. I mean, it is sad. I mean, as I said in this article, I don't know whether I should be happy or sad about it. Is that everything I've been wanting to do for Hong Kong, now I'm doing in Shanghai for the Shanghai East. So I think for some people, my departure to Shanghai might be regarded as a betrayal. But what else can I do? I mean, as a curator, I need development. I look for, a new level of experience. And what concerns me even more is the lack of nurturing of a new generation. So what we're going to end up with, who's going to run the West Kowloon? How we're going to pass on all this information to our next generation? And this remains very disturbing to me until today. I'm just going to stop here.
Can I take a quick response? Well, actually, I agree with Oscar's observations. But then, actually, on the whole, if we take all the resources into consideration, be it private or the government ones, and actually, I think we have invested a lot of money into the museum to develop a host of curators, for example, assistant curator, and then curator one, etc., etc. There are many curators actually in the government museums, but as you said, they have no individualism. They're not there. And but then so I think, but then for the private sector, for all these small spaces, we do a lot of curating things by ourselves. And as such, I think it's really the allocation of resources. But who is the one? Who is that particular body to oversee? Whether how actually this kind of resource should be more effective and more efficiently deployed. Because we do have a lot of curators. It's ridiculous, it's paradox. It's a paradox. Because in the museum there are so many, but they're not there. And just like the Heritage Museum recently, they have several big exhibitions. They don't curate the shows themselves. They engage private curators to go in. And there are a whole bunch of curators to support that guest curator. and they just dare not pick up the guts, as you said, So I think it's really a matter of how to redeploy the resources, how we get the resources into the right place. But who is the one to say anything about it or to make decision on this? I think we all have to discuss. Because for the private sector, even though you said it's very difficult, for us to get really professional. But it's very organic, because if we find that the museum of the government museums do not really satisfy us, we will try our best to do something in other places. It's very organic. We cannot stop ourselves, even though we haven't done it well, I admit, all right? Because we are running out of resources, we haven't got sufficient resources, but still we try to make ends meet. So that's another area that we should try to look into. And yeah, I think that's much for me for the time being. But I think it's really, because there are many curators here, very strange, but they are just not doing the right thing. Or the non-curators, do the curated things.
No, I wanted to ask why.
Yeah.
That's what it seems that a lot of curators, there are a lot of spaces.
You can have, you can
But
have museums,
why
there's
is
so
the
many.
outcome? Because the Museum of Art has, I think, 3 curators and they have each 2 assistants. So that's not a lot for.
The money, when you count the money, it goes
Yeah,
to
the money.
10 or. But for
Yes.
each of us, for curator, we don't have curator fees sometimes.
One revolution is the bureaucratic system, a civil service system that discourage any individual expression. If a curator wants to write something, for example, and publish it in, say, in a newspaper, he or she needs to get approval from his or her superior. Now, this is awful. I mean, so sometimes I feel it's unfair for the curator. They've been criticized. They cannot come out and defend themselves, engage in that kind of debate, So it's a system discourage controversial, discourage individualism. It's a collective decision, in making things.
You have to be anonymous.
And also the system that you are promoted to certain positions is not based on your speciality, but rather than, if you happen to be you might be a specialist in Chinese art, but it's happened to be a position in contemporary art, and you just happen to be, there long enough, then you move from there. And then the free things move around as curator. There's always speciality. You specialize in your certain form of art, but if you get transferred for 3 months or every 3 years, how on earth can you develop that kind of speciality? So to be fair, it's a system that suffocates them. And but by the time when you move to the really senior positions, you've been sort of in this system so long that you no longer feel the pain of the system, and you just operate as it is. So to liberate the museum from that kind of civil servant culture is essential.
Yeah, I'd like to supplement something. Just go an example. For example, like the coming Hong Kong Biennale. Now they've got so many for able curators inside the government. Actually, if I were one of them, if I were the chief curator, I think I dare do something, really by the museum itself. But now it's not a system. The system is trying to engage a group of people, a group of jurors or judges, and then they are these guys, these 6 or 8 local and overseas artists, they just get it together and then they make the decision what are the best artwork for the biennale. Of course, the judgment, we can discuss about it, but where is the curatorial judgment of the Museum of Art of Hong Kong?
The government institutions, that's allocation.
Could it be that we have too many resources, that we have too many spaces and not good? Because, but it seems like we have these artist-run initiatives we just talked about, and we have the Museum of Art, but we're just missing the middle part. And we also, in these government, in these middle part, we don't have the resources, and here we are back to make the shows. Or is it like that we are not working hard enough to actually, because that's something I think which happens a lot in all of our spaces, is that we could do better in doing more international shows and bringing more international things over here. Or it is, you know, that's...
Yeah, what Norman was just talking about, I mean, responding to what he said, is that it's an issue of diversity and pluralism. Now what happens is now you have this gigantic system, and then you have this sort of dainty little space, try so hard for, you know, and sometimes I feel for certain exhibition, if I just give them a teeny little bit more, they can do much, much better. And I hate to see them for years stay on that level. You know, it is not because of lack of talent, real determination, it's lack of that kind of support. And then I see a great injustice. Okay, let's forget injustice. It's just simply from the healthy development of the art scene. We need that kind of diversity. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, one of the systems we're really lacking, and this is really the problem of our government's obsession with brand big buildings, with the lack of the middle range museum or art space or gallery, so that the artists and the curators have this kind of different types of space to work in art. So they all build big gigantic. Now at West County they talk about 4 gigantic museums again, instead of I've been calling for Church a small medium-sized museum instead of things like this. So first of all, the lack of a total vision of the need, and secondly, the lack of kind of respect for diversity in the cultural development.
But part of the reason we don't have any of these sort of mid-level spaces is because the art scene here is still very young, despite what everybody wants to say. It's a very young art scene. It hasn't been around that long. And the other issue is is how much responsibility people are supposed to take for this. Because everything seems to be coming back to resources over and over again from what you guys are saying. And it's simply not the case sometimes. Some of these shows have a significant amount of money or a fair amount of money. And so there's something else happening that's devaluing the quality of the show. There's something going on that's just different than simply a lack of resources. And there's certainly not a lack of spaces. I mean, there's been a number of people here who have said, for example, we don't need any more museums. We don't need 20 mid-size or 4 big ones. We don't need any more. What we need is to run the ones we have properly. And that's what we need. I mean, I think we can open that up and get a lot of argument about it. But I know Claire, for example, has said this, and I totally agree. The last thing we need is 4 big museums. So I don't think that's the solution.
So do you mean that is really the professionalism of the curator?
I think that's part of it. I think everything keeps going, especially in your article, everything is dumped back onto the government as the problem. That's bureaucratic and that it's a funding issue, which are certainly major issues. But it positions us as artists and curators as victims, as powerless within a system, and we have nothing to do with it. We can't do anything, and I for one, refuse to believe that. I won't accept that.
Wasn't there the idea of having a contemporary art museum a few years ago, and the government wanted to have one, and then something went wrong?
Well, actually, that was years ago, they did. Actually, in fact, at that time I was the one against it, because the government did, like West Kowloon came up with this plan that looked so silly. That I said, you better sort out what you want before you build a museum or something.
And now you wish they would have done it?
Well, if they still do it that way, they will still do it this way, no.
No.
So I agree with Norman that we should take our own action and do our job. And I think it is all, I've been in the government, and the kind of money waste is shocking. And, you know, and it's a great injustice if we don't do anything, you know. And we should not just accept.
No, I'm not saying, I'm saying the exact opposite. We shouldn't accept it. But if the government is doing it and nobody in this room is challenging it, then whose fault is this? I mean, the government is at the service of the people, not the other way around. So if the government isn't doing what we want, and the people who, there's a lot of people in this room, including both of you, who've been on different committees with the ABC. And so if things aren't changing, who exactly are we blaming for this? I mean, I think there's something a little bit awry in this pointing and blame. And maybe it's because we shouldn't be blaming anybody.
So any comments, any response from you all?
Okay.
Yes, no, I just wanted to say that it keeps going back to the government, but one thing that we also do realise is that there's very little support from the private sector. And like in other countries or other cities where there's a thriving art scene, and it's very much one patron, for example, who will put together a collection, donate it, or a private corporation who gives money to sports credit. But I mean, Samuel Kung, for example, who is setting up the museum in Shanghai, he's from Hong Kong. Why is it not happening in Hong Kong? Why don't we have something like that in Hong Kong? People will say, okay.
No, I fully agree. I fully agree. The problem is more than just the government. I mean, sometimes also the artists, you know, when no one's ever seen a show, why? You know, because we bring the audience, or we making art that's not meaningful to the audience. So it's far more complex than that. But once again, I still see that the uneven distribution of resources is very suffocating. We also, you know, there's all kind of problem, including as you said, the patrons, you know, and why are they supporting it? About the curator, how curator responds to the social needs, you know, how we define art, I mean, how sensitive are we to the community's needs for art and culture, and how do we define art as something meaningful to the communities? And also the issue of artists, you know, should we just run complaining, you know, we see art, how are we as an artist responding to the community? So it's a complex issue. You know, there's more than just one party to blame. But I still feel that at least one of the major issues is that.
But aren't we now, because we are basically as curators here, is it sometimes that we have to blame ourselves, that we are sometimes too nice to the artists? It seems like. No, I mean, because with all these institutions that are here, and with a lot of, I mean, I saw a lot of good shows since I'm here, and I'm here only since but I saw also a lot of very horrible shows since I'm here, of local artists, I have to say that. And you ask yourself, with these many institutions for such a small art scene, isn't it maybe sometimes too comfortable for the artist? And we just don't, we cannot say no, we cannot say, look, sorry, we don't, you know, we don't exhibit you, we don't, I had people yelling at me because I said I don't want any proposals anymore on the throne, because people kind of, they think every local artist has a right to show in every local institution. And isn't that something we also have to address?
Well, it's a problem as you have to face as a curator, especially in small communities like Hong Kong, especially a Chinese community that take face very seriously. One thing I learned quite early in my career is that when you become a curator, you have to make close friends with artists. You know, it's going to make life very difficult. You know, so that's part of the sacrifice you have to make. But yes, things like that happen, and it is hard. It is hard.
And maybe the problem isn't so much that we're treating them too nice, but the expectations are too low sometimes. I don't think it's, I think I'm just saying the same thing in the other way.
Maybe, yeah.
I think, and then it puts the onus more on the people who are in the power, positions of power here. They're running the spaces, and these are, a lot of people have nothing to do with the government. And the shows that, there've been two really big shows this spring. We spend a lot of money, and both of them were horrible and bad, and neither of them really had anything directly to do with the government. The reason they failed, or they were poor, they had nothing to do with the government or anything to do necessarily with funding. They had to do with the curatorial structure and the organization and the artist performance, right? And I think that's something that happens as often as the government screwing artists or spaces over. Granted, that's still a big issue.
I felt that the discussion so far has been, to me, a little bit over diagnostic. Like we're trying to take out all the problems about why curators don't have jobs, whether we have places for them, what the problems are. But I'm actually coming here today more interested in discussing the question of why do we think we need a new curatorial culture? What situations are we facing in Hong Kong? What exactly it is that we want to bring back the question of having a curator or having new thoughts about, attempts to redefine what curators' job should be. Can any of the speakers on the forums talk a little bit about that? Because I think we know there are a lot of problems about the current practice. And I agree that probably with Norman, I don't think I really worry about curators getting the training and not getting the jobs, because I think that might be a question as a result of a much broader discussion. But I think giving this type of diagnosis might be constructive, but maybe for the time being, I feel I want to open up the discussion to more broader issues. Why do you need, what have we noticed about the local art scene, say like in the past 5 years, that push us into this direction? What is it that we are expecting? Perhaps not single curators, perhaps a curatorial culture. What might that mean? That sort of question.
It's very easy answer. Well, I think we all really want to the curator to create so that can produce very good artwork, and then it helps to enhance the quality of art in the city. For me, all right, for me, I would have this expectation.
I think curator is a mediator between the artist and the community. As for what kind of roles you're going to take as a mediator, it's up to the individual curator. I think there is definitely a role for curator to play in terms of putting this together, presenting it, or even interpreting it. And I think this is the kind of elaboration that I think is quite important, especially especially in contemporary art, when that kind of mediation is quite critical. So there's definitely a role for a curator to play if we're going to take art and culture seriously.
I want to give an example which happened in Lithuania, which is a country above Poland, which is where I visited quite a lot. And Lithuania was part of Russia till 1990, and then it became independent. And they had a huge, wonderful art center, very big, and they gave it to a guy which was 24 years old. He was still in school, but he was the only one who could get it because everybody else was in the artist union. And he, for basically 10 years, ran that place in a team with a lot of very good, very international shows, and he ran it just as one of the best places in Eastern Europe. And as a result, if you now go to Lithuania, you have a lot of very young but very good artists that are shown not only in Lithuania but all over Europe. If you go to Estonia, which is just 2 hours up, you have the same situation, you have the same academy, you have the same size of country, but you don't have this contemporary art center, and you don't have the international shows, and you don't have this very high-class art event. If you go there, you will hardly find any artist that produces art on an international level. And what I want to say with that is that that actually the curator or a very curated show also sets a benchmark and can bring art in that is a benchmark, so young artists or young students and so on can see the international discourse. And what I'm missing here in Hong Kong at the moment is that you cannot see that. Even if you are a student and you do go to the galleries, which most of the students don't do, unfortunately, you don't have a chance here to see what's going on out there, to see what Art Forum is writing about, to see what the biennales are showing, and so on. And so that is what I think is important and why we need, and if you call them curators or museum directors or producers or whatever, that is not so important. It is that idea of editing and to kind of making it possible for certain kind to be shown, certain kind of art to be shown.
Are you referring to Raimundas?
No, I refer to Castutis, which is the boss of Raimundas.
Okay, because I mean that kind of situation arose because these curators studied in other countries. They didn't study in Lithuania.
No, but Castutis studied in Lithuania, and Raimundas was then a student of him. But that's,
I mean, I think it's a personal network that was created thanks to the fact that they were studying curatorship in Amsterdam, for instance.
Yeah, but
they were exposed to the network of
a lot of
artists
people in
there.
Hong Kong study. I mean, there's somebody came back from the English from the Goldsmiths curatorial program. It's not so that people in Hong Kong don't go abroad and.
Now, I was just asking you whether was that the case, because I would have that kind of explanation for this kind of internationalism that you found in Lithuania and you didn't find in Estonia. It could be just a matter of the fact that the curator has a personal network that was created at the time when he was a student abroad.
Yeah.
But this was not what I wanted to ask you. Actually, the question is, I agree with most of the things that Norman said. I don't think we need more spaces, but I would play devil's advocate and say, do we really need a curator in the year 2005? I see situations where different positions overlap, and it's a very fluid situation. You have artists working as curators for a period of time, then going back to producing art, and vice versa. Curators who at some point decide that they've enough of curating shows and they start producing art. And I see artists who don't really need curators because they have their own channels. And who is now a curator accountable to? We have these, celebrity curators, and they are accountable to a network of collectors, basically. So they're not that independent, despite the fact that they are so-called independent curators. So who is your ideal curator accountable to? Is it accountable to the government? Is it accountable to private collectors, to the artist, as Tobias seemed to suggest? And again, there's not much money involved if you're simply accountable to the artist. So this is the big question. Who is the curator accountable to? And do we still need curators to produce good art? I see good artists who use other channels. Could be the internet, could be, you can produce a magazine and your art would actually reach a much wider public than by actually showing it in an art space. So there are a lot of questions that I think we should address. We might two questions
There were a lot of questions,
are curators accountable to, and whether we still need curators in the year 2005.
Well, it depends on how you define a curator, number one. Who is a curator accountable to? If you believe in the old-fashioned mode of a curator as sort of the single genius who curates a show or an entire museum or whatever based on their vision, they're accountable only to their board of directors, right? Instead of the board of directors. But today's relational aesthetics kind of curating, they're accountable to the community, right? To the artists in the community. They're not accountable to the government. They're accountable to whoever's funding them, of course, but their real accountability, at least that's how they put it, is to the community. And do we need curators now? I mean, I would certainly say so, but that's fine. But I'm talking about a different kind of curator, a much more flexible curator who's writing, who's teaching, who's doing less conventional curatorial practice as well. So he's not just the head of a nonprofit space or Christine Shoes. That the definition should be broader, which is a different problem. There's a bigger problem here. Is the problem of the curatorial world changed? Tobias would know more about this than I, but anybody would see it as there was that type of curatorial practice that evolved into this new one, which is much more relational. But Hong Kong never went through that original phase. There was never a phase, a modernist phase, of high-level, powerful curators running single institutions. It never happened. So we've sort of jumped right into this new kind of curatorial practice with no foundation and nothing to rebel against, right? We have no modernism to fight. We have nothing in the background to sort of work with. That's a big part of the problem. So that's where I would say that the education and the preparation for younger artists and curators is even more important because we are missing that history.
When you first asked who are curators accountable for, I would say, I thought history. Because that's like, if you look back in the curator, you look back in Hans-Ulrich Obrecht or in Juan Rus or things like that, of what you call a celebrity curator in their CV, and you see what they did and what was important and which artists did they work with and what did these shows actually did do, like Juan Rus and Hans-Ulrich doing City on the Move, which was one of the most influential shows in the last 20, 30 years. And that's something you can account them. You can say, yes, they did a good job on that, and that was interesting, and they did that till now, and what they're doing in Guangzhou at the moment seems also to be much more interesting than the rest, which is what is going on in Guangzhou in the museum. And do we need curators? It's a little bit like asking, do we need CEOs, or do we need any experts? Sure, you can live without them, but the outcome will probably, the chances that the outcomes are not that good are pretty high, especially in a highly developed world, especially art world like it is at the moment. And I mean, we just had a big exhibition curated by an artist in Hong Kong, and I didn't really like the outcome. So, we need curators. Oh.
I think to that question because I think it's quite interesting what she asked. And isn't it 1 year ago, I mean, you know that I come from a different cultural context, but isn't it 1 year ago that the Biennale in Guangzhou talked about dictatorship of the communities? So I mean, in this respect, there is something more. Sorry? Korea. Right, from Korea.
Yeah.
There was a dictatorship of the curator. Something like this was a title of it. I mean, it's a catchy phrase. But I don't think that it's only the, you don't want to deny that we need experts. That is not the point.
So,
I guess like a lot of things in our world, the definition of curator is so diversified. I mean, obviously on one side you have this glamorous kind of movie star type of curator that hold quite closely onto the collector. But there's also really independent, really creative work. So in a way, it's difficult even to answer, what, when you're a curator. However, there's always, I also like to emphasize the curator is more than just a curatorial interpreter. There's a lot of practical work that the curator is supposed to do, and you always need that person when you organize exhibitions. As for accountability, obviously, I mean, if you ask, they all will talk about, they're accountable to the artists and the communities. It's almost like a classic mantra. Underneath, there's always different currents and influence and power, and that's the reality of it. It's like anything else. When you talk to people, they all talk about this wonderful rationale, and underneath there's always this current of power. And I think it's require a lot of determination for a curator not to be taken by this kind of various temptation or due to this various pressure. It's actually, in fact, this is the hardest part, is to retain kind of curatorial integrity.
Yeah, it depends. But I think the question, because the idea or the issue about power and curating and power relationship and what you do by doing certain curating, what you show and what you don't show, because you show and don't show, it's questionable, and that certainly is a question which is something curators should ask themselves. What do I do here? But that isn't an issue which is very much discussed. That's what I said when there are books and books and books and books about the power of curating
And there
and
are
how bad.
artists whose fortune depends on whose gallery they work for. So basically, the power of the gallery is just as important as the power of the curator. So in Hong
Much
Kong,
more
we don't
important.
have that system. So
This is exactly the problem. One of the most frequent criticism of curator is this kind of interpretive dictatorship.
Yeah.
The fact that they interpret, they decide to choose certain artists. And I have to admit, when I first started my career, I felt really guilty about that. It's put me into a very difficult situation. You know, who am I to choose what is good and what is bad? You know, quote unquote. And I mean, you know, actually, I talk about that in the little yellow book I have. And you know, I came to the realization is it's inevitable. First of all, curatorial interpretation is always objective. You know, this is an objective. It's inevitable that one would have a kind of curatorial interpretation. You know, what is very essential, the two very essential points here. First, you need to be not only sincere about what you think, but also you need to be precisely because your curatorial decision is a subjective one. You need to be self-critical and frequently reflect about it. The other thing is, you know, it's still inevitable the curator will have his or her perspective. So how can we ensure that different perspective will come out? That is diversity. We need to ensure socially we have a kind of pluralistic system that allows different forms of interpretation. And this is exactly what I come back to this kind of democratic censorship. You know, it's more than just funding. It's to ensure different ways of looking at things, got their ways out. Okay, so if Oscar Ho doesn't like it, okay, maybe Tobias like it, or maybe somebody else. I mean, we have 20 curators here. We have 20 different perspectives. And this is something that I think is essential. On the one hand, we respect the professionalism of the curator who have to make the interpretation. On the other hand, we have to recognize that he or she says only one perspective. And so important thing is socially, we need to have that kind of diversity.
I'm asking some more questions. Do you think that curating by committee is a more democratic or more diverse way, or is it actually holding back diversity and being kind of a pseudo democracy? Because I think most of the organizations that you work with are more committee-based curators. I mean, yeah. Yeah, you are independent, but like I think it's like Monet is
well, I don't know if we call ourselves a curator.
yeah.
I think we would have our own curatorial vision or aesthetics, so we sort of confidence in ourselves, and so whether it's too subjective or not, I'm not really concerned. So such if a show is to be the judgment, is to be made by one person, I don't think there's any problem in it. But then if an organization has no confidence in engaging a particular entity and they trust a group to ensure fairness, because when you get the group, it means that you want to be fair. You want to be seen to be fair. But then, well, when you're talking about art, we have to be fair in that sense, or I don't know. So really, it depends on how we look at the role of the curator. If it's a curator, that means he's the one, he or she's the one to in a way determine what the exhibition.
So is it more fair to curate in a group?
Well, years ago, I was one of the adjudicators for biennial here. And so it's a group, it's sort of an adjudication committee panels. And what I find that really disturbing is when, for artworks that sort of like get the majority vote, normally it's a mediocre one. Because, the really good ones, someone that does something nice that everybody sort of like a little bit. Since end of what happened is, I remember at that adjudication, I made a request can we, adjudicators, individually, sort of choose a particular one? But when we do that, we have to put our name down. Say, for example, if the shows come up, Oscar Ho picked this, and he was responsible for that. I said, I don't mind. You got to be a system allow that kind of individuality. Otherwise, a kind of group decision will be just kind of idiocracy. But they turn my personality.
I have two questions. I'm actually not very familiar with Hong Kong art scene, so I do apologize if I'm getting the facts wrong. I find it very interesting for an artist-run center to have a curator. No offense to you guys, but I think most of the artist-run centers in Toronto, they have committees, different committees, the support of directors, and underneath that, all the members run different committees. And often there's programming committees which look at submissions and also find independent curators to join together. So I find that system works very well for independent curators, and so they have opportunities. And so I don't know how it works for in Hong Kong for the independent curators, right? The trend seems that there will be like a curator for the artist centers.
There are 6 artist-run centers. One has decided to appoint a director.
Sorry.
There are 6 artist-run centers, 5 or 6 or whatever. One of them decided to go another way.
Yeah,
so there's still 5 left, which do the old way.
And quite a number of artist-run centers in the U.S. and North America have curators. They may not be or artistic directors who define the vision of the space. So there may be a committee and there are board of directors. For example, the board of directors has no curatorial input.
Right.
So I mean, it's not what you're describing is certainly normal, but I can name another set of spaces that have curators, and they're there for a certain term, a year or 3 years or whatever, and then they move on. And there's always, of course, that space for independent. But here, I also want to say we were talking about this idea of curatorial power, and frankly, I think that's the last thing Hong Kong